as COVID-19 has exposed gaps within the country's health system, from the shortage of PPEs to antiretroviral treatment and COVID-19 infection among a number of health workers. In addition, the country records cerebrospinal meningitis-related deaths almost on an annual basis. While the outbreak has revealed the weakness in the health sector, it has tested Ghana's economic resilience and generated revenue loss. This afternoon, we will delve into epidemics preparedness in Ghana in the context of financing and interrogate available measures, resources to address them. Right now, we're joined in studio as the advocate for pandemics financing, Dr. Abubakar Mohammed Mazouk. I hope I got that right. Sure. All right. Many thanks for your time. Now, we've seen a number of pandemics in Ghana, from yellow fever to cholera and now COVID-19. How would you rate Ghana's preparedness for any other pandemic?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and good afternoon to the cherished viewers of ours. It is important for all of us to understand the need to prepare very well at all times towards the financing of epidemic or pandemic. Your question is clear. Even your intro has made it clear that our health system has been exposed in terms of its weaknesses by the COVID pandemic. So whatever measures we have, this is not to say that we haven't done anything, but any measure put in place in the face of COVID is weak, inadequate, and therefore calls for the proper preparedness towards any pandemic. Clearly, it is important for all of us to understand that we are not alone in this situation. Even at the global level, countries of technological and scientific supremacy have succumbed to the devastation of COVID. So if our preparedness, currently as it is inadequate, that is not to say that we are not doing well, but that is to say that we must wake up and do better.
Now, in terms of doing better, how can we beef up our preparedness for any unlikely pandemic? Because who would have thought that COVID-19 would hit the shores of Ghana now? And our neighboring countries, we've seen Ebola, where we've been able to manage it well. But in terms of a pandemic on such a global scale, such as COVID-19, how can we beef up our resources to ensure that we are better situated or better positioned to handle such pandemics?
Every kind of preparedness depends on one thing in two. One thing in two, that is knowledge in two forms. Knowledge as a form of expertise, and knowledge as a form of advocacy. And that is what Ghanaians should understand. For instance, it is important for us to appreciate the need for preparedness. That is a matter of public awareness. It is important for us to appreciate the expertise for the preparedness. And that is a matter of expertise and public policy. So we have public awareness and public policy. It is clear that if you look at the characteristics of any pandemic, you realize that any pandemic at all is a potential enemy to all of us. One, a pandemic is widespread. Two, it is infectious. Three, it is community-oriented. And four, it is time-related. And therefore, we are all potential victims of pandemic. And if it stands to reason that we are all potential victims, then of course any solution to it should be a collective responsibility. I am calling for, because you are asking of a specific, in fact I am suggesting to the policymakers to establish what I call pandemic or epidemic financing fund. This fund should be well balanced and properly constituted, and the administrator of the fund should be an expert. Definitely, if we are able to understand the need for all of us to contribute to this fund, then we can do well. For, as I said, this fund should be managed by a secretariat, and that secretariat should be well constituted and balanced.
Doc, I'll let you hold on there. We're also joined via Zoom. We have Dr. Dennis ODOI, LARYEA, who's the acting head, Disease Surveillance Department of the Ghana Health Service, as well as Bright AMISSAH NYARKO, who's the chairman of the Coalition of NGOs in Health. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Many thanks for your time. Let me start off with you, Dr. Dennis. I'd like you to break it down for us, some common outbreaks that we've seen in Ghana. I know for a fact that we've seen CSM, we've seen cholera, we've seen yellow fever. But what other pandemics are there that requires us to, prepare ourselves?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to your viewers as well. I think you've taken the wind out of my sail. You've mentioned the commonest ones, and so I think I shouldn't be surprised. Yes, meningitis is. We like to say cerebrospinal meningitis, but that's just one category of the meningitis that we can get as outbreaks. We also have cholera. I think that cholera is one of the commonest outbreaks we've been reporting, even though in the past 5 or so years, we've not reported cases of cholera or outbreak, as it were. The other thing we report, H1N1 is another outbreak that happens. We've had a few in some schools, in particular in the Ashanti region, if you remember the Kumasi Academy, for example. Outbreaks also happen in small forms. So we can have outbreaks happening, let's say, in schools or in various offices. I think especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen close outbreaks in small areas, and then that is something that we can be able to say happens in the country. But generally, these are the ones we've had to deal with over the past few years. Thank you.
Okay, now let me come to you, Bright AMISSAH. You're the chairman of the Coalition of NGOs in Ghana. From where you sit, do you think that Ghana's response towards other smaller outbreaks, for example, what Dr. Dennis just gave us with cholera and whatnot, do you think that we've done well to manage these outbreaks vis-a-vis COVID-19?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your cherished viewers and listeners. Yes, I think Ghana has done well over the past years about how it manages its outbreak of pandemics. Just that we do it as and when they occur. And to us, that is the challenge that we have. When we are confronted with a situation, you see a lot of preparedness and the emergence of health strategies and then reforms coming up for us to address the issue. But I think what we've not done so well is to think in the long term, to put down a strategy to address a pandemic as and when it comes up. I think that is what Ghana is at the moment lacking, and we have not put enough resources together and a strategy down to be addressing this. So in most cases, we are caught with a pandemic before we take action, and it's not a good thing for us to do. It's about time we set up an emergency fund and a long-term strategy. We should have personnel in place who are trained to address various pandemic issues. Ghana is not lacking these things. We have a lot of good resources in terms of personnel and then strategies to put together. But unfortunately, we have not made projections to know that after 10, 20 years, there's a possibility of a new pandemic striking, and then Ghana might have its share. When we begin to think like that, then we will be in a position to put down appropriate strategies to address them, and that is where we think we have not done so well. But with the management of the current COVID situation and the other pandemics, I think we have done well and are making progress.
All right, Bright. So you're saying that we're rather reacting to some of these pandemics rather than a preventive, way of going to prevent such pandemics. But how can we prevent or manage such future pandemics?
Yeah, so that's why I said we could make projections. Dr. Lai mentioned the meningitis, cholera, H1N1, and others. Before these ones came, we could go back to look at other ones that came before this. Ebola visited us not quite long ago and left before COVID came. So it means that if we make projections, it is likely that after every 20 years or 2 decades plus, it is likely to be hit with some form of pandemic. And so if we are able to prepare these strategies down and raise enough funding and train a lot of human resources just for on a standby to receive this pandemic, we will not be caught wanting when it comes. If we don't receive external support and then funding to address our pandemic issues, Ghana would be going through a lot of crisis in managing its own affairs. So it's about time we look at strategies to address some of these issues in the emergent way as and when it comes. So we prepare the strategy and then we look for funding. So we set up something like an emergency health financing fund. If we look at all the pandemics that have also hit us, most of them, the preventive ways has to do with immunizations. That's why in the recent term, we had a Corona COVID Trust Fund, and then we have also have a tax for COVID. So in some ways, civil society, and for that matter, Ghana Coalition of NGOs in health, in most of our forums have even argued that why not convert these funds even to an domestic immunization financing fund? And then it sits, then we look for a lot of money to feed this fund, then it becomes our emergency fund. Because at the end of the day, immunization becomes one of the major preventive ways to address these issues.
Absolutely.
But we can argue and that even our current routine immunization is fully sponsored by Gavi. So it's about time we put our strategies and then align them with our current immunizations and have a certain fund which would address future pandemics, which I think we are not thinking that way, and it's very challenging to the country.
All right,
from where we sit.
Thanks for that. But let me come back to the studio and speak with Dr. Mohammed. So in all this, what is the role of government with regards to financing to prepare ourselves for future pandemics?
The role of government is clear. Just as my colleague and I have agreed on the establishment of a fund, I am saying that, first of all, government should establish the fund, but the fund should not be a government affair. It should be a collective responsibility. Government should also create a conducive atmosphere for the contributors to the fund to have enough revenue and funds so that they could contribute very well. For example, the contributors could be made up of the corporate institutions, civil society organizations, the media, and then any other, religious leaders, and then traditional leaders. Contribution should be in kind or in cash. For instance, TV3, in a form of contribution, could give free airtime for discussion on the issues of pandemic or epidemic. It is important for all of us to understand that epidemic or pandemic is an enemy to all of us, and therefore we must all be prepared towards its solution. Let me say it clear that if you analyze our situation, it looks as if we are more reactive than proactive. And I think you wanted to pose a question like that. Our situation is clear. We are more reactive than proactive. Let us now move from the reaction to proaction. And in that case, we can put in place measures. In fact, we should try as much as possible in the face of COVID-19 to make epidemic or pandemic issues subject matters of public discourse. Let us now prioritize issues of epidemic. We should try as much as possible to, just right now, if you go to any institution, there are COVID measures, enhancement logistics, for example, or COVID measures in enforcement logistics. We have the hand washing logistics and other things. Why don't we also make any pandemic at all a matter of public awareness, so that any institution at all should be able to have a desk, a particular desk on pandemic to enhance the quality of public awareness and patronage. We talk of vaccination. Vaccination is one thing, and the application of the vaccine is another.
Thing.
Of course, the application of the vaccine is subject to public awareness.
Okay. All right. Let me come to you, Dr. Dennis, very briefly. In all this, what is the role of the citizenry? Dr. LARYEA, can you hear me? I think you've muted yourself. If you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, apologies. Yes, before I talk about the role of the citizens, I think I need to correct a few things that have been said. To the extent that resources are limited, I think I agree perfectly with that. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's not just health, but in several sectors, sometimes financing some very well-intended activities can be a challenge because we have limited resources. But the impression should not be created that we are not prepared for epidemics. You can only react to an epidemic. The point must be made. You have your preparedness plans and you respond to an epidemic. We have what we call the integrated disease surveillance and response strategy. That's what Ghana uses. That means that every day we're looking for some epidemic-prone diseases. If a case is picked up, it is reported immediately to the highest level. And that would then cause us to initiate a cascade of events or activities that we have already pre-planned. So there is a strategy to deal with these pandemics. We've had H1N1 in Ghana. We dealt very well with it. COVID-19, I don't think that we've done very well. Ghana has been praised for our response. I've sat in several West African Health Organization meetings and other international meetings, and Ghana has been credited. The government of Ghana has provided a lot of resources to respond to outbreaks. And for me, that is the critical thing as a public health person, that when we need resources, these are made available. In cholera outbreaks that we've had, in the meningitis outbreaks that we've had, government has responded appropriately. I am not an economist or a finance person to go into the merits or demerits of setting up a fund. But as far as I am, as a public health expert, I'm concerned, if there's an outbreak, we should have a plan to respond. And if resources are made available for us to respond, that for me is all well and good. And I'll give an example. When I worked in Konfanochi Teaching Hospital, we developed an epidemic preparedness plan, even for the hospital, on how to manage cases. For example, if the numbers overflow the designated wards, where will we take these people? So there are strategies for various diseases. COVID is novel, and I think we responded appropriately. As far as projections also go, look, we've taken up modeling, for example, as a department. As I speak to you currently, we are working with a team in the UK and the School of Public Health to come up with various models to project some of these things into the future, to be able to determine the burden. So those are very important things that we do behind the scenes. And if there's no outbreak, nobody will get to know that some of these things will happen. So I'll ask my colleague, the colleague in the studio with you, and also my colleague online to get in touch with me. And I think that we can be able to furnish them with some more information on the things that we are doing.
Dr. LARYEA, unfortunately, you would have to bring our conversation to an end here. Join us via Zoom is Dr. Dennis LARYEA, who's the Acting Head, Disease Surveillance Department of the Ghana Health Service, and Bright AMISSAH NYARKO, who is the Chairman of the Ghana Coalition of NGOs in Health. And joining us in studio is Dr. Abubakar Mohammed, who's an advocate for pandemics financing. Many thanks for your time